What's next for The Legend of Zelda? Breath of the Wild was such an ambitious adventure that it not only helped the franchise rediscover its roots, but it gave us the largest discoverable open-world Zelda game to date. Seriously, you could spend hours exploring all the nooks and crannies of Hyrule, just doing everyday things like cooking, fishing, taking pictures, and for the hardcore completionist, there are over 100 shrines with various puzzles to solve and nearly 1,000 Korok seeds. The game is so expansive and has taken so many years to develop that as fans, we can begin to question what's next. Now, before we get started, what is your favorite Legend of Zelda game of all time? Whether it's 2D, 3D, handheld, for a home console, spin-off, anything goes. And feel free to jump into the comment section and join in on the conversation at any time. Now, it's unlikely that a home console will see two mainline Legend of Zelda games, with the exception of Nintendo 64 that released Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask within a year and a half of each other. Granted, they were built on the same engine, but for Nintendo to create an entirely new experience, is it possible? By now, you're probably all shaking your heads thinking I forgot about instances like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess on the GameCube, while simultaneously releasing at the Wii's launch. And the same goes for Skyward Sword, which came out around 5 years or so after Twilight Princess on the Wii as well. Back in September of 2018, Aonuma said in an interview that it's possible for the next big adventure to release on the Switch, but are we destined to follow a similar pattern with the next big Zelda game coming out at the end of the Switch's life, but also being ported as a launch title for Nintendo's next platform? All of those questions are rhetorical, but the main focus is to talk about Link's next big adventure. Where is Link going to go next? And I'm using Link as more of a generic character term because I know it's not the same Link in each game, but what I should be saying is, which Link will we be given and where will he go? Is it safe to bring up the timeline yet? Because you know that's coming. Okay, let's talk about it now. If we go all the way back to the first game following creation, which was Skyward Sword, we get the forging of the Master Sword, the emergence of the Demon King, and Goddess Hylia being reincarnated as Zelda. After Ocarina of Time, the timeline splits 3 ways, with one of them including the founding of New Hyrule, which follows the cel-shaded Legend of Zelda games. In essence, they become their own separate timeline of games, and then you have the other 2, which depend on the hero winning or losing against Ganondorf. However, there are also events that are listed in between games on the timeline that could be settings and stories for future games. For example, we have the Hyrulean Civil War that took place in between Four Swords and Ocarina of Time. Now, is it possible for us to get a Legend of Zelda game that takes place during that war, and maybe the villain of this game isn't Ganon, and Link is fighting for one of the sides? The setting would feel very political, but I think it has a lot of potential. Maybe each dungeon could be a different general's fortress. I'm kind of just throwing out ideas here. And the recently released Breath of the Wild, and I say recently because it's in the last couple of years, which is recent for a Zelda game, has been confirmed by Aonuma to be, in quotes, at the end of the timeline, but doesn't specify which because it's up to the, let's use quotes again, player's imagination. And again, I don't want this to be a discussion about the timeline itself, but rather a reference for specific time periods. Personally, I don't know if I would enjoy anything more futuristic than Breath of the Wild because it would begin to feel less like a Zelda game for me, unless it's done correctly. But let me know in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on a more futuristic setting for the next big Legend of Zelda game? My vote goes for something predating Ocarina of Time because I think there's a lot of unexplored history, especially with a major civil war that takes place before a game that splits the timeline. I would love to see this reincarnation of Link be a nobody soldier who fights his way to the top. In the meantime, we do have a couple of games releasing this year to hold us over, the first being Cadence of Hyrule, which I'm incredibly excited about. I didn't play Crypt of the Necrodancer, and the game is coming from the same studio that created Crypt of the Necrodancer, but I've heard great things about it, and Link to the Past being my favorite Zelda game, I'm all about it. It's supposed to release this spring, so I'd expect it to be out by hopefully the middle of June, possibly with an available now announcement during E3 in a couple of weeks. Then there's the big Link's Awakening remake that took us all by surprise. I think Link's Awakening goes a bit unappreciated because it came out so long ago, and there's a lot of younger fans who may not have had the opportunity to play the game. It's easily one of my favorites. I'm glad to see it getting the attention that it deserves, and receiving a complete remake on a home console. As for the art style, I know some people have had a problem with the cute Link design, but I think it's a perfect fit. A top-down Zelda wouldn't feel right being remade as a 3D game, and it would feel even weirder if Link was depicted as the adult he is in Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword or even Breath of the Wild. I predict that we'll likely see a release for Link's Awakening around November, since that's when Nintendo likes to drop a lot of their big first-party titles to get ready for things like Black Friday and the holiday season in the US. And referencing back to the Aonuma interview we mentioned earlier, I highly doubt this was the next big series entry title possibly making to the Switch that he was referencing. But how much bigger could the next game get? Breath of the Wild really set the bar for what an open-world Zelda game could be, and I don't think we necessarily need a bigger world, as a game doesn't have to grow in size to be a good successor. I think using the open worlds we were given, look for other stories to tell in it, as there's loads of potential to explore historical events in Hyrule. Another thing we've seen very little of in the series is deviation from a linear storyline. Yes, Breath of the Wild is a giant sandbox that you could spend hours exploring, but the decisions you make throughout the game don't have any effect on the story, and at the end, you're still going to defeat Ganon. I want to see branching paths with a deeper storyline. Give us some characters to get attached to and then rip them away from us. Yes, I've been watching too much Game of Thrones lately, but even if it's not that tragic, allow choices to determine the outcome of a game. It instantly increases the replayability, and it's worked in so many games outside of the Zelda franchise. If we did get a game based on the Hyrulean Civil War, allow us to choose sides, make choices that change the course of the war, let us betray people or prove loyalty through the choices that we make throughout the story. And at the end of the game, get various endings depending on which side wins the war. I'm literally coming up with this as we go right now, and unfortunately, I'm creating a vision of a game that I want in my head that we may never get. I think we can only be given stories that go from A to B for so long before it gets stale, and it may already be stale for some people. I'm hoping that this is the direction that Nintendo will decide to head in for the next title. We don't need any more quantity, but what we need is more world building within what we've been given already. And please don't take this the wrong way, Breath of the Wild is an excellent game and one of the riskier entries in the franchise in a long time. It brought us back to 1986 when you started a new game and you were dropped in the middle of Hyrule to find your way with no explanation, or very little explanation in this case. And one thing that Breath of the Wild really nails is the quantity of things that you can do outside of combat. I've spent countless hours cooking meals to find new recipes that will give me different bonuses, and taking pictures of enemies, animals, and flowers to fill up my book. Now, you don't have to do all of those things to complete the game, but it adds to the experience. And I think that all of that combined with a deep story that has branching paths that are solely dependent on how you want to play the game could easily rival Ocarina of Time as the perfect storm. And although Link to the Past is my favorite, I still consider Ocarina of Time to be the best, and maybe I'm a bit tainted with nostalgia, but I've yet to be pulled in as far as a story goes as I have with Ocarina of Time. But what does your dream Zelda game look like? What are you hoping to see next? Let me know in the comment section below, but seeing as we won't be getting something for a while, we can do what we do best and speculate. I did a similar video for Mario's Next Big Adventure. If you haven't seen it, I'll leave a link down in the video description if you'd like to check it out after this one. If you're interested in more of these, it can become a series, maybe. So if you enjoyed it, click the like button, because that lets me know that you like it. For real, every like is like a little shock directly to my pleasure sensors. Ooh, felt one just now. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing for more content like this. I also do a lot of Smash. I stream. I'm on Twitter. All that stuff. You can find those links down below. But thanks for watching, and we will see you later.